I want to do very brief introductions. Sitting immediately next to me is Amir Khosrowshahi, who is a neuroscientist and has sold a company to Intel, is in with Intel now. Wang is the founder and CEO of an Internet of Things company called Tuya. He also was the first general manager of Alibaba Cloud. And finally, furthest away from me is Feng Zhao, who is the chief technology officer of Hire, the appliance manufacturer, and spent a good deal of time at Microsoft, which I hope we will also talk about. So first of all, gentlemen, thank you for being here. Amir, I'd like to start with you. I mentioned at the outset that you're a neuroscientist, which we might not expect someone to be at a semiconductor manufacturing company. So I'd like to ask you to start off our conversation by putting in context what we mean by data explosion. What does all this data mean to a technical person and then to a business person?
So this is a very good question, and it's timely. We are collecting data at ever-increasing rates, data explosion. And this is part of a virtuous cycle where we're collecting data, whether it's in an IoT context or whether it's scraping the web or customer inputs, and we're extracting intelligence from this data. And the things that I work on at our company, Intel, is how to extract value from this data, and that requires compute. Every piece of data that comes out of an IoT camera, other sensor, or any other device, you need to perform computations on that data to be able to extract some value out of it. So that can be a staggering amount of compute. And with success of compute and algorithms, then it encourages more collection of data. And this virtuous cycle is increasing. And we are creating new types of hardware to address these, this explosion.
I want to try to put this in historical context. Decades ago, we had mainframe computers. Then your company came to prominence by fueling the personal computer revolution. My understanding is that personal computers and the storage that they have are not sufficient to the data explosion. That's why we have the cloud and why we have large data centers. What is the hardware that is needed? What will be needed in the next how many years?
So when you talk about IoT and data, and it's the same as other contexts of AI. We're building AI systems, and AI systems invariably have edge, data center, automotive, wireless, all sorts of components that are not AI-centric. So storage of data, you mentioned, is a critical part of the engineering task. Compression, databases, other kinds of software, web servers, OS, and so forth. So you can imagine if you're building an AI system with all these different kinds of workloads tightly intertwined, you have to have a variety of kinds of hardware to address them. So traditionally, CPUs have been used to do everything. But what we're finding is...
a CPU is?
A CPU is a central processing unit. It's the brains of your laptop or your data center.
Got it. Yep.
So it used to be that we did everything with CPUs, and things were great. But the amount of information coming in and the requirements and the business need are such that we are finding that it's advantageous to build new types of chips to handle new kinds of data and new kinds of systems, new kinds of software. It's quite an interesting time.
OK, very good. That I think really helps us set the context, which brings us, Jerry, to the Internet of Things. Will you start by explaining to the audience what your company, you're the head of a startup, what your company does?
Thank you, Adam. My company, my team, previously works for 10 years in internet industry for Tuya Smart. At the very beginning, we focused on manufacturing companies. In the previous 10 years, for internet, we focus on service industry, but now we are helping manufacturing industries to turn themselves into an RT-based company, and we are helping their product to be smarter, and so as to increase the demand from the consumer.
An example of a customer of Tuya Smart and how they use your technology.
比如说我们
For example, we are serving Walmart of US. Walmart have a great demand when they are selling electronic appliances. They hope that this devices is an IoT device. For example, Amir provides smart audio equipment, and with this equipment, you can control your cooker, your rice cooker, or control your air conditioner through this device. So Walmart do not have the capability to provide this smart device, so they will approach their supplier. Their supplier don't have this capability also. So Tuya Smart are helping Walmart to get smarter devices or IoT devices. In this way, they can sell smart bulb, smart lighting, smart air conditioner, to sell these smarter devices to U.S. citizens, IoT devices.
We have someone representing a very important appliance company I'm going to come to in a moment. But tell everyone about your geographic expansion. I know you started in China, but you're doing business in the United States, and you want to do business around the world. Would you talk about that, please?
At present, for those customers that we are enabling, they are selling to 180 countries and regions. So we have global coverage. We focus on North America, Europe, India, China also.
Feng, one of the companies that makes appliances, of course, is Haier, and you have great capabilities to do sensors and Internet of Things. Would you explain to us at a high level what your company is doing and what your goals are to accommodate the data explosion?
Thank you, Adam. I'm here, representing Haier, Jitan. It is actually the largest large home appliance manufacturer and service providers in the world, according to Euromonitor, 80 years in a row as the #1 in the market leading position. As in manufacturing, we are actually in the digital transformation from a hardware manufacturer to a service providers that combine hardware, software, and services. And I think that is a profound transformation to actually go to the model where we actually view our customers, not just as a one-time transaction that providing hardware. We actually maintain a lifelong relationship with our users so that once the users have our appliance, they will actually get our services throughout the lifetime of the products, but more importantly, device after device and service after service that the users and the customers will be around the ecosystem and the solution we provide. So in other words, we are not just a hardware manufacturers. We are providing leading smart home solutions that actually covering all aspects of the life at home.
So once upon a time, you and your competitors would have sold a refrigerator, perhaps at a large appliance store, a retail store, and then that's it. Then you said goodbye to the customer. Today, you want to have an ongoing relationship with that customer.
You're absolutely correct, Adam. Of course, in the old days, it's the hardware, and you buy it from those large centers. But today, we have so many touch points, the digital touch points, the consumers and our users with the manufacturers, and with all these services behind it. Now, Haier is providing one of the services, but we're integrating all these services around our platform. And what enable all these touch points and this zero distance to our users is the technology of sensors, which we call IoT, and as well as all these Internet and AI and the data technologies that let us to know what the user like and what functions that we need to update and integrate into the next generation of our product. And that's the speed that we are moving at.
You know, it just occurs to me, I've never asked anybody, how do you say Internet of Things in Chinese?
Internet of Things, 物联网.
And does it translate directly, or is there a, is it?
It is pretty much a direct transliterate of Internet of Things.
Did he do a good job of translating just now?
对，如果说是从翻译来讲是非常准确的，对。
As the translator do it very well. Well, IoT was a name for 10 years. It focused on intelligent, not internet.
Okay.
Missed that one.
Feng, before I move on, will you tell everybody an example of a higher product that you're very excited about right now that is in the marketplace or will be in the marketplace soon?
Yeah. So, you know, many people have been talking about Internet of Things for many years. We are actually in the market that we serve our customers. So one of our leading product is this interactive fridge. So this is not like, you know, so like our grandma's generation fridge, which is used to just store food, to keep it fresh and longer. Now, of course, Haier has the leading technology to keep the food fresh for a long time. There's a lot of chemistry, there's a lot of technology there. But more importantly, with this Internet of Things, with this data, this fridge now is, in addition to keep the food fresh, last longer, it actually knows what you put into the fridge. It has RFID, it has the barcode scanner. When you put a carton of milk inside it, it'll record it, and it'll remind you when the milk is going to be actually expired soon. Or better yet, when the egg shell and the cartridge runs low, it'll actually remind you that, oh, you better actually grab the egg next time you are nearby a grocery store. So this actually helps you to manage the food. But based on that information, Adam, as you said, the data explosion really means that it knows what the user wants and what the user has been using and what the user probably going to use, and capture that intention and serve the user better by actually suggesting healthy dietary menus or food preparation suggestions. So that screen, 21-inch screen on the fridge would actually remind you and as well as suggest the recipes that are grabbed from the cloud, but tailored for the health of the family. Now, that actually the entire ecosystem of the health management is way beyond just the food storage, but integrated with all the services. Some of them are hires, some of them are our partners, the ecosystem that we provide.
And how far along is that technology? Is that a CES product, or is that a product in consumers' kitchens?
So the product I mentioned, we already have 3 different products, from a high-end to mid-range to something that's affordable to wide swath of the consumers that are now already in the stores, that you can go to your nearest Haier appliance store or experience center, or go to Suning or Gourmet or whatever the ones nearby, that you can actually buy one and bring it home and experience it. And it has all these Internet of Things connections to actually help you to manage your health.
And Christmas and the Chinese New Year are just around the corner for shopping for everybody in the room. Amir, tell us, explain to us Intel's AI strategy. What will the products look like in the next 10 years if Intel is going to be as much of a winner in AI as it was in the era of the CPU? See how I learned that?
Yes, yeah. So Intel, the history of AI and the history of computing have been intertwined since the 1930s. So the very first people who built computers also started the field of AI, Alan Turing and John von Neumann. And the history of Intel itself has been tightly intertwined with the history of computing itself, and now with machine learning and statistics and artificial intelligence. With the evolution of our field, so I work a lot in the research side. I'm extremely optimistic about how our field will improve in the short term, medium term, and long term. I know it has a lot of successes, and you've spoken about it quite a bit, but I think there's an enormous room for improvement on all fronts. So on the computing devices, we talked about processors. Processors have traditionally done a wide variety of workloads, but we're now building neural network processors. Intel is building neural network processors to handle neural network compute, which is quite different and specific and narrow, as well as devices, processors that go into refrigerators and your edge devices. These also have very stringent requirements that are specific to the domain. So what you're going to see is a proliferation, a heterogeneous set of hardware available for different applications, different settings, whether it's video, vision, speech, text, and so forth.
Very good. I want to ask each of you to talk about security. Jerry, I'm going to start with you. What is your company doing to keep the networks that you operate on and that your customers operate on safe?
Well, as a matter of fact, before the founding of our company, in the early stage leading to the founding, we had about a decade of experience in our internet-related security. For PC internet or consumer Internet of Things, we have an IaaS layer, infrastructure as a service. And then from IaaS to PaaS to SaaS, security should be built in throughout those layers. But we are finding ourselves in a different era. We are living in the era of AI plus AIT, or what we call the intelligent internet, from PC to mobility, mobile internet, and to ubiquitous computing, ubiquitous connectivity. Therefore, we need a complete layer of security from IaaS to PaaS to SaaS. Well, our security offerings are straddling across all three layers, so that for our customers, the entire system is intrinsically secure. It can stand the test of GDPR from EU and also privacy laws in the US as well.
Feng, I'm sure this is a big issue for hire. It may seem silly, but I really don't want you to know that I'm using, lactose intolerant milk or whole fat milk, because this is very embarrassing to me. And how are you protecting me in that regard?
So, Adam, the security is actually a very broad term. My colleague Jerry just mentioned, right? There's a lot of device level, system level, networking level security. But higher, as our products actually being used by tens of millions of consumers every day, we actually take security actually from its holistic, this scope. That is, there's the system security. There's also the physical safety. Right? Our devices need to be safe. We have kitchen products, we have ovens, we have these. And then there's also this notion about the data security or privacy. So, example that Adam, you mentioned, that has to do with actually how do we deal with data and how do we respect the user choice. And that's a extremely, I think, important topic or the issue that actually all of us are addressing. And I think, the government actually had set up various regulations with the purpose of protecting the consumers, the rights of consumers. But I think there's actually a number of important issues, and higher is really actually one of these pioneers in actually pioneering this adoption. That is, we need to make sure that there's the issues about the data transparency, the fairness of the data, and giving user the choice of how the data is stored and used and being actually monetized. Now, that's extremely important. And I think that actually brings us to this notion that how does the user know their data is being used? In what ways, right? Does the user have to important say in how the data is used? And I think a lot of those important regulation and protection is let the user to decide, right? This is Adam's, your data, and it stores on your home network for the sole benefits of managing the house and so on. But of course, in order to actually be able to improve the products and so on, there's a certain amount of those data that are not sensitive that could be aggregated for manufacturers to improve what's the next iteration of the product design that are much more user-friendly or improved over time, right? And then there's also the fairness, right? The data, based on data, the AI technology or the data mining technology actually are drawing the conclusions so that we can actually make sense and act on it. But if the data is not representative, or in other words, the data is actually biased, in statistics,
yes.
we always talk about, the sampling and whether this consensus that we got is actually representing all these different pockets of the data. So there's quite a lot of those technology, but as well as actually the process we put into place to make sure that the data we collected are representing all the interests of the people that are representing our user base, so that our products will serve in the best interest of these users.
My understanding is that a company like yours needs to pay attention to 3 regulatory regimes: China, Europe, and the United States, each of which have different opinions on these topics. Is that true? And how do you approach each of those 3 from this topic of security?
So, different geographical regions has its rules and regulations that pertaining to the consumer, rights protection.
Yeah.
And our products are actually meeting the highest standards for each of those regions. And this is actually has been, since the first introduction of our products. But the way we do this is that Haier is a global company. And as some of you in the audience probably are users of Haier products, right? In China, we have the Haier products, we have the Kasadi products, we have the Tongsai products. But in overseas, we have the Haier products, but also under other brands such as GE Appliance, Fisher and Payco Appliance, and the Sanyang, the Aqua, brands. Now, for all these brands, we have our global distributed development, research, and manufacturing centers. There are 10 of them around the world. And the reason for this is that these R&D and these manufacturing sites are closer to where the consumers are.
Yes.
And they can incorporate the needs of the consumer into the products
yes.
that sell in that region. And also fully compliant with the region
yes.
compliance.
I totally understand. Thank you. Is there any question before I move on to different topics from the audience? If you raise your hand, we can get a microphone to you. Amir, I know you want to talk about security, and you've raised a topic called homomorphic encryption.
Okay, I'm not sure how that's going to translate.
I did know what a CPU was when I asked you to say what it was, but homomorphic encryption, I don't know.
Okay, so I think Jerry spoke about the various levels of security in a system, an AI system, and Feng spoke about issues like bias, transparency, GDPR. So now more on the research side, there is the potential for algorithmic privacy, that you can design your algorithms so that they're cognizant of the underlying data, that there's a desire for the data to have certain levels of privacy. So you mentioned homomorphic encryption is the most stringent form of privacy, where the algorithm is encrypted, the weights of the algorithm, the parameters, the data is encrypted, and you can operate on the data in an encrypted fashion, produce an encrypted output that is then sent in an encrypted form to whoever needs it. So you have full encryption end-to-end. No one knows what the data is, the model is, and what the results are.
Very interesting. The end-to-end part, yep.
That's one form. Then there's other forms that are less stringent, and I'll just mention them: differential privacy and federated learning. There's various tiers of privacy. So these are being developed, and I'm very optimistic about the prospects.
Great. Please.
Jennifer Juskow from Radiant Partners. Recently, Steve Jobs started to talk about industrial data complex, and we have also seen...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. He didn't do this recently. You said Steve Jobs?
Sorry, Steve Jobs, Tim Cook.
Thank you. Thank you. You got me very excited for a moment.
I just came from Hong Kong. I get very jet lagged.
Totally understandable. Please.
Tim Cook was talking about industrial data complex, and also we have seen Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, centralized the data ownership now raise a lot of questions in terms of surveillance capitalism. So since privacy is a very nuanced issue and it's different from individual to individual, And regulation is very much a broad brush, right? So as corporate leaders, do you think there's anything more you can do?
And Jerry, if you would take that, if you would, since you're operating across so many jurisdictions with your company.
Well, indeed, for the internet, especially for mobile internet to mobile internet plus our IoT, in the case of my company, we're still in the early stage of our takeoff development, and we every second we have 1 million requests for data. That might be a lot of privacy-related issues. In the case of Apple, when they designed iPhone from the very beginning, they built in the feature that if I want to access your geographic location, I need to ask for your consent. If I want to use a microphone service, I need to ask for your consent. So that's a very good example. When we design a product as a corporate leader, we must put ourselves in the shoes of the consumers, asking, what should I do with the data? If I want to do anything with the data, we need to ask for the consent of the consumers first and foremost. That's the responsibility of corporate leaders, always putting ourselves in the perspective of the consumers. For example, when I go to bed with the push of one button, I can close off the curtains of all my bedrooms. That's a very important function, but you need to ask the consent of the consumer.
Quick question for the two of you. There are, you founded the Alibaba Cloud. You were at Microsoft. With Microsoft, Alibaba, Amazon are three of the biggest players in the cloud today. Are you a customer of Alibaba Cloud, and are you a customer of other clouds? And same question for you, Feng. This is our last question, please. Jerry.
Well, as a matter of fact, yes. I founded Aliyun Alibaba Cloud. Now I'm a customer of Ali Cloud, but we're also using Microsoft Azure and AWS of Amazon. In terms of data usage or customer privacy, it must start with the infrastructure all the way up to the edges and devices. So I think every layer of security is critical. For example, for Aliyun and AWS or Azure, from the very infrastructure level, security is built in. And then that comes to my company at the platform as a service layer to add security to our capabilities. And Intel can build security into the processor level. And then we have Hire who can build security into the products. So putting together, we have a complete security.
Feng, very briefly, please.
Yes. The answer to your question is actually yes, that Hire as the entire integration from products all the way to our customer and the user, we're actually using all these platforms as needed. That is actually the Ali Cloud, the Microsoft Cloud, the Amazon AWS Cloud, and plus a number of other cloud providers. Now, the reason is very simple, that for different regions and for different needs, we use the best underlying cloud technology. But there's a lot of things we need to build in order to actually deliver the customer the best product experience, our manufacturing agilities. So we integrate all these IaaS and SaaS and PaaS.
So if I could make one concluding observation, the data explosion technologically is global, oftentimes business is regional. And I want to thank the three of you very much for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.